day. My name is Jabray Phillips, and I'm here to try to get exposure and justice for my son, Quintas Harris. My son, Quintas, was shot and killed by four DeKalb police officers in DeKalb County, Georgia on August 3rd, 2017. There has been little publicity or coverage on his death. My family and I have tried for the past 5 months to get answers. We've had no success from the GBI or any form of law enforcement. My son's case is presently on the district attorney's desk with DeKalb County. I have written letters to the director of the GBI. I've sent emails to Governor Deal's office of Georgia to no avail. And it's really hurtful that my family and I have not been able to get any answers, and also that my son's death has been treated as if my son's life had little or no value to it. But I want to kind of take you back to give you guys some background. It's only fair that I do that. My son was a military Navy vet. He was released from the military in July of 2011. He came back to Georgia in December of 2011. Upon his arrival back, my family and I noticed that his behavior was a little erratic. He's very emotional, cried a lot, just was not himself. So we took him, we had him treated in January of 2012, where they diagnosed him. A physician had diagnosed him at the time with schizophrenia. As they continued to treat my son, they later came back and diagnosed him with PTS or possible PTSD and suggested that my family and I take Quintas to the VA. However, Quintas, he refused. However, he continued to receive treatment through the agency that we had selected, which is a private institution. And for years, Quintas had suffered with this disease. He was on medication, and at some point he decided to refrain from taking the medication after his first son was born. He felt that the medication did not allow him to be a father to his son. So that kind of was how our journey began. So my family and I, we took this last 6 years with him in and out of medical facilities, back and forth to the VA, also receiving treatment from a local agency here in Georgia. On the day of my son's shooting, I was called by the property manager, and the property manager disclosed to me my son's behavior was erratic and that I really need to speak with him, because if not, they would have to have him evicted. That was my cry, and I said, no, don't do that. Please allow me to call him. And they said, yes, we really like him. We never seen him act like this. So anything you could do, please do so. I tried calling my son. Unfortunately, at the time, I was unsuccessful. So I decided that I would reach out to the facility that was treating him. I spoke to the counselor, shared with her my concerns, and she also became concerned. And she said, you know what, Ms. Billups, I'm going to have someone reach out to your son and talk to him. So I continued my search. After I spoke with her, I contacted the DeKalb County court system, basically expressing my concern. What could I do to force my son to go on medication? I was informed that he should already be taking his medication and should have been attended to by DeKalb County mental health probation officer, who should oversee him taking the medication. So notably, I said, well, he's not doing that. Shortly after hanging up with that person, I received a call from the medical center, who was supposed to have followed up with Quintas to make sure he was okay. The person and I shared a conversation which probably lasted about 15 minutes or so, where he expressed to me that Quintas did not seem to be of any issue. Now, this didn't seem to be a problem for him. He just seemed to be tired. That Quintas had expressed that he had not slept in a while. So the anxiety, but however he would go out and speak to Quintas the next day. I shared with him that I felt that Quintas was not okay. And maybe I knew best because I was Quintas's mom. You know, the mom would, of course, know better. So we continued to talk, and I expressed my concerns for Quintus, that I wished that the program would teach him how to live with the disease, how to live with schizophrenia, how to live with PTSD. Because him going in and out of the hospital was not my solution for him, or the final course of action for him, because I didn't see where it was helping him. He was only getting worse. He would be okay temporarily for the 3 or 4 days that he was in. Sometimes he was in for 2 weeks. But shortly after, he had to come back into society and figure out how to deal with this disease that really was hard for him. He didn't like the way he was perceived by society, by his friends, and so it just made it difficult. He has 2 young sons, and how his sons would see him, that was also an issue for Quintus. But long story short, we ended our call, and Quintus would call me shortly after. He told me that he was tired, he had not slept, and that the police had come out to his home. He didn't know what they had expected to find, but he was just tired and he wanted to know would I come by. I questioned him about the phone call I received from the property manager. He says, Mom, I didn't do anything to him. If I wanted to hurt him, he said I would have. Are you coming by? And I said I would. I hung up, and then I decided I would just go ahead and leave work early just to go by and check on Quintus. I arrived to Quintus's apartment. I telephoned him because I parked out in the parking area. He did not answer. So I got out of the car and I went upstairs. I didn't hear any music because usually he would have the music playing, and I didn't hear anything, so I went back. But I did not feel comfortable leaving him based on the phone call that I had received that day. I decided not to hang around in the parking area. I kind of drove around in the neighborhood to some homes that Quintus usually would visit. I didn't see him, so I waited at the local convenience store. About an hour later, Quintus telephoned me and said, Mom, he said, I'm home. He said, are you coming by? So I turned around and I came back to his home. I didn't go upstairs. He always kind of came downstairs to meet me in the parking lot. And so he saw me and he smiled. And after he smiled, he started crying. And he gets into my car and we start to talk. And I asked him, why was he crying? And he says, Mom, he says, I'm just so tired. He said, I don't have any friends. He said, I just want to be a father. He said, to my kids. He said, why can't I have my kids? He said, why can't I have my kids with me? He said, why can't I just be happy? He said, everybody is happy. He said, why can't I just be happy? He said, these people, they're trying to kill me, Mom. They're trying to kill me. He said, they want me dead. And he said, I can't stop these voices in my head. And he said, I can't stop them. They won't let me sleep. They keep bothering me. And he began to hit himself in the head like that. And I grabbed his hand and I lowered his hand down. And I told him that everything was going to be okay. That the voices were not real, that no one was trying to kill him, and that we loved him. And he kind of looked at me and he says, okay, Mom. I said, Sean, you've done this long enough. You can't do this by yourself anymore. We're going to have to get you some help. He says, Mom, I don't want to go back in the hospital no more. He said, please don't put me back in the hospital. And I said, Sean, I don't want to put you in the hospital. I said, but you're going to have to get back on your medication. And we talked about the medication probably about 5 minutes or so. And he agreed that he would get back on his medication. And I told him, I said, okay, I'll be by tomorrow. And either we can go to the VA or we can go back to Viewpoint, which was the medical center that he was being treated by. And he says, okay, Mom, fine. And he hugged me. He said, Mom, I love you. And I said, I love you too. And I said, you got to be careful. I said, I want you to be careful. I said, because if you don't get back on the medication, I said, my fear for you is that you're going to end up back in the hospital. You're going to end up in jail. I said, you're going to end up dead. I said, because people don't understand. And I don't want anything to happen to you. He says, Mom, he said, I'm going to be okay. Nothing's going to happen to me. So again, we hug. He said, I love you. And he gets out of the car. But I didn't know that that would be the last time that I would see my son alive. I woke up the next morning at 6:42 when I observed the Channel 2 news. And on Channel 2 news, they showed Maple Walk apartment complex, and there were blue lights, and it said that a suspect had been in a shootout with DeKalb County police, and the suspect had been taken to a local hospital, which was Grady Hospital, and it went off. So I went to my cell phone and I tried to find the article. And upon coming, I forwarded the article to my daughter. I texted to her and I said, I think this is Sean. And I turned to my husband and I said, that's him. And he asked me, how do you know? And I said, that's him. So I get up and I go in the bathroom and I start trying to call my son on his cell phone, but of course he didn't answer. I start sending him messages through Facebook, and of course, he didn't answer. So I telephoned at this time Grady Hospital at 7 o'clock, and they were in the middle of a shift change. And when I got to the first personnel, I asked them, could they connect me to the emergency room, because I figured they would have brought him in through the emergency room. I spoke to the young lady that was back there. She was a nurse, and she said, well, can you tell me what your son looked like? Can you describe him? She said, because we don't have nobody by that name. And I said, no, you're not going to have nobody by that name, because they said that the suspect was unidentified. So I began to identify him for her, and I said, well, he has a tattoo, I said, right over his eyebrow that reads Kennedy Drive, and he has another tattoo that's under his eye that's a clown slit. And she says, ma'am, I don't have nobody that looks like that. She said, but let me get you to the social worker, and maybe they can help you. So she transferred me over to the social worker, and the person told me, she said, well, give me your son's name and information, your name, and I'll call you back. And then we hung up. So at this point, I proceeded to hurry up and get dressed in it, because that just didn't set for me. That 7 o'clock hour. And that didn't set for me. That didn't work. So at that point, I started to get dressed, and I jumped in my car, and I told my husband, I said, I'm going to go to his house. I gotta go to his house. And as I get in pursuit to my house, I get a phone call saying someone from the neighborhood called and said Sean was killed last night. So I get back and I turn around, make a U-turn, turn around, go back to the house, and I get my husband. When I get back to my house, my husband's in the car and he's crying because he's already heard the latest update that the suspect had been killed. But little to me, I didn't know that. I didn't know he had been pronounced dead. So we get in the car, and my husband said, where do you want to go? I said, well, I want to go to his house. I want to go, I got to go to his house. So we're in pursuit to, or en route to my son's house, and my daughter telephones in, and she says, what do you want me to do? I said, what do you mean? So we're on our way to the hospital. We're going to go check on him. And she says, Mom, what do you mean you're in the hospital? I said, yeah. I said, we're going to go to the hospital, check on Sean and make sure he's okay. She's just crying because she didn't know that I didn't know he had already been pronounced dead. And I start telling her, I said, you got to be positive. You got to be positive, he's going to be okay. And she says, Mom, he's dead. And I said, no, he's not dead. Because I didn't want to believe that. Because here we are now, going into the 8 o'clock hour, and no one's called. No one from law enforcement. No one's picked up the phone. No one said, Miss Billups, your son is dead. No one said anything. So we continue, my husband and I, to Grady Hospital, and we get there. And they send us to the social worker, and they have us wait. And about 30, 40 minutes later, the social worker comes out with a piece of paper in her hand, and she says, the person that we have has been taken to the medical examiner's office. And she gives us DeKalb County Medical Examiner office number and the address. So my husband and I, we leave the hospital, and I get in the parking deck, and I telephone the medical examiner, and I call, and I tell him who I am. And I told him I want to make a positive identification on my son. And at this time, he asks me for my son's name and my son's date of birth. And when I give it to him, he says, we don't need a positive ID. Say he's already been identified. And so I asked myself, by whom? And they said the FBI. So at that point I asked, I said, well, what happened to him? They said, well, you're going to have to go to DeKalb County and find out. I said, where's his belongings, you know? And they said, you got to go to DeKalb County. So we rush over to DeKalb County, and we get there, and they send us up to the 3rd floor homicide. And my husband picks up the phone because you don't have a person. You would think you would have a person. And they tell us that the case is being handled by the GPI. We need to go over to the GPI. And so we leave and we go to the GPI. And when we get to the GBI, they didn't know what we were talking about. They didn't know who we were talking about. My husband's at the door, at the front desk with them for about 7 to 10 minutes. And finally they put us in a room and they said, well, let us see, can we get somebody who can help you? And we go and we sit in this room. Just sit in this room for about 25 minutes or so. And finally, the security officer comes in with the medical examiner for the GBI. And she takes my name and my phone number, and she says that the person that's handling your son's case is out in the field. I'll have them call you. And so we leave and we head to my son's apartment. And when we get there, you can't even tell that an incident had even taken place. There was no blood stain. There was nothing. A few bullet holes in the wall of the apartment, but we didn't phase us. We didn't pay it no mind. The news, one of the local news stations were out there taking interviews. And the gentleman walked up to my husband and I and said, do you want to give a statement? But little did he know, we still had never received a phone call. No one cared to call him. No one from the GBI, no one from law enforcement called to say, Miss Phillips, I just want to let you know your son is dead. So we didn't know what to say. What could we say? No one officially told us he was deceased. So we go up to his apartment just in disbelief. And the property manager comes out and he offers his condolences. And he actually was the one who gave me the keys to my son's apartment. He said my son's apartment was left open all night. And he went up that morning and he locked the door. So we would leave and we go home. And time passed. We moved away from the 10 o'clock hour to the 11 o'clock hour to the 12 o'clock hour. And finally at 1:22, I received a phone call from the GBI saying, Miss Phillips, I guess you heard by now your son is dead. My life stopped. It stopped that morning at 6:42. And 1:22 didn't resuscitate. And unfortunately, it would be that Sunday before we even would lay eyes on his body. August 6th, when we would see his body at the funeral home. Because we sent the body back to Alabama so he could be laid to rest next to my mom. But I think it's relevant and it's important that people understand that my son was a good person. I know you say, well, everybody would say your son's a good person after they're dead. Why would he be shooting at the police? My son was going through a psychosis. And the police had come out to his apartment that day in the 1 o'clock hour, the noon hour, 1 o'clock. And on that visit, the police responding officer would write that my son had the music playing loud, and he was loud, and he seemed confused. He couldn't even make a clear statement. And one of the neighbors said that my son had threatened the officer, and they basically say, you know, he's just he's a shark with no teeth. He doesn't mean anything by it. But rather than trying to get him help and noticing that he was confused and he couldn't make a clear statement, they would leave him there. And in 11:30 hour, almost 12 o'clock midnight hour, they would receive a call from the neighbor that a demented man with a gun had shot at one of the neighbors. He shot in the wall. And everything from there kind of goes blank because everything becomes hearsay. Because we still haven't had a conversation. The GBI finally came out to my home on August the 14th after my son being pronounced dead at 12:50 a.m. on August 3rd. And when they visit my home, they would tell us that they would do a thorough investigation, and upon completion of that investigation, they would come back out with my family and they would go over the evidence. And at that point, they would give the evidence to the district attorney who would at that point determine the innocence of guilt if they had a trial. And we said, okay. They said, well, we may or may not agree with the findings. And we said, okay. As we didn't ask them to give a verdict of innocent or guilt. We only asked them for due respect of telling us what happened to him on that night. You didn't have enough respect to pick up the phone and call or come to our home and say, Miss Billups, your son is dead. My son was pronounced dead at 12:50 a.m. on August the 3rd. And it was 1:22 p.m. before anyone would come and make a phone call. And months shortly following after his death, we would ask you for information. And you'd be dismissive and rude, as if his life had no value. We deserve to know what happened to him. My son deserves the justice he deserves. As witnesses look upon, they noted that there were over 60-some shell casings on the ground. To me, a shootout is an exchange of multiple shots. Multiple shots. So exchange of fire, not from one side, but from both sides. The only shots that we have been identified with was the first shot that came that was initiated, the original call for the neighbor, and the one that we've been told that my son shot the police officer. But there's no fact that has been found on that or presented to us at this moment. So that's allegedly, as far as I am concerned. There were 87 markers on the ground during that investigation. And we still don't know at all. My family have no idea what the other 81 markers were. We only know what 6 of the markers were. And those were the markers that were identified by the medical examiner, because those were the items that were near my son's body. I'm trying to understand, why would it take that many shots? You responded to a call of a demented man with a gun. Clearly, you were not, by any means, unaware of the call you were responding to. When you arrived on scene, you said my son was barricaded into his car. He was no danger to no one but himself. And I know that's just from my point of view. I understand that. But what was your crisis intervention training? That was an opportunity. You would call, what is it, 10-3 to stop transmitting. Why not call 10-103? Making the additional responding officer aware that you had a demented man with a gun. Why? So they would be aware of what they were responding to. You use your command and control tactics and you shot him down in the street as if he was a dog. As if his life had no meaning. And even though I sit here and I'm hurt that I lost my son, I don't hate you. I don't hate the officers that did this to him. I don't even know who you are. I glanced your picture in an article, and it only revealed your last names. I actually feel sorry for you because you have to sleep with what you did. When you close your eyes, you have to think about what you did, the life that you took. But I do pray that there are new policies and procedures that will be put in place as we move forward in 2018 that will stop another parent, another family from having to go through this. My grandsons are fatherless. Another set of black boys raised up without a father in the home. Will they become a victim of the system? This is a total injustice, and someone needs to give answers for this. Officers have got to stop using and thinking with the gun belt. When my son was barricaded in his car, once again, why didn't you call for a local hospital clinician or someone that could help? Why didn't you telephone the VA? The witnesses state they told you he was a veteran. They told you he had issues. You went on the media the day of, and you pulled his police file, and you tried to justify killing him and gunning him down as if his life had no justification, it had no meaning. Why? Because you say he had a criminal background? Does that give you justifiable reasoning for his death? You bring up his criminal background, which had nothing to do with the incident that was taking place. That same conversation that came about his criminal background, there should have been a conversation about you all responding to a call early that day. We can't continue to take lives and leave the families behind to pick up the pieces. You take lives as if it doesn't matter. Like there's no accountability, there's no responsibility. There is a responsibility. And I want justice for my son. My son deserves justice. My family deserves answers for what it is that you all have done. And if you're back in the office, which we don't know if you're back on the streets or not, you need to be taken off of the streets until you learn how to deal with situations. You learn how to deal with people who have mental illnesses. Or call for help to help those who are unable to help themselves. You all took an oath to serve and protect. Where was the protection in that? And if you shot at him 3 or 4 times, tell me what was the purpose of the other 55, 60 times? We want justice for Quintas, and we want answers.